What's up, guys? Bill here. Welcome back to another watch list walkthrough. Today I'm going to focus on IWM and SPY. There were some really great opportunities out there, even though it was a little bit of a challenging market today with expiration. And after a big move across the market yesterday, you're usually going to get some consolidation and some chop in the broader sense. So trying to identify those names with relative strength or weakness that you can get a little bit more of a move on can be a bit of a challenge. But I actually mostly just traded indexes today. Let's start with IWM. I took two trades on IWM, both to the long side. And the reason I was looking for that was based off yesterday's candle, okay? If you guys saw my most recent video on power earnings gaps and kind of how what I look for to try and spot the pegs that will the next day have the best chance of getting another leg up or making a nice move early on, you can apply that same knowledge to indexes. And IWM was a great example today. You can see here that yesterday's candle was a massive move up on huge volume, one of its biggest moves it's ever had, and heavy volume, one of the biggest volume days in the last couple of years. And it closed right at the highs. Those are the three things I'm looking for. How big was the move overall? This was 5.5%, which for an index is massive, right? It's not kind of, different than these power earnings gaps. I'm looking for 10% or higher. It's earnings, right? It's those moves are going to be bigger, but 5% on an index is massive. And the volume was obviously huge relatively, and we closed right at the highs. So what I was doing for the next day was looking for a red to green move on IWM. And here's what we got. Here's our previous day's close. We did open above it just slightly. So we opened green and then we pulled back just a bit and came down and kind of swept these lows of pre-market and then reclaimed it. Once we did that, I hopped in momentum entry on calls. And as you can see, it was a really nice move that just went and went and went. And I was able to catch most of it just by scaling at, targets that made sense to me. 180 psych was a big one. Pre-market high, you're looking at taking some profits. We see all this consolidation in pre-market. That's where we also got some consolidation on the way up and flagged here and then broke out again. 180, 108. If you go back to the daily is where this FVG from this day down fills. It got all the way up there. I mean, it was just great. And if you missed that, you could fall back on the tried and true opening range break. So you can see here that we put in this big stick, and that ends up being essentially our opening range high. And then we start to consolidate a little bit. But while we're consolidating, we're getting these big wicks down, showing every time we pull even a little bit, buyers are stepping in, forcing price back up. And then I like to use the 10-minute for confirmation on my opening range breaks. We closed the 10 over here, and we weren't too extended. Remember, if this candle had closed up here, I'd be waiting for a pullback and retest. But we closed very near the opening range high, so that's an entry right there. I still had some runners from the earlier position, but what I basically did at this point was add a new position farther out of the money, and then traded that pretty much all the way up to close to high a day. Pretty much came close to top ticking it. Was just looking, once we filled this FVG, was just basically looking for every 50 cents. So scaling at like 180, 150. And then if we would have got to 182, I would have trimmed even more there. But that's just, pretty basic stuff, guys, on IWM as far as the opening range goes, at least. But hopefully, the tidbit about using pegs, the peg system you can use it with indexes too when they have big days like that. If you're really looking to do something, different off the open, it's, an interesting trade to take. And IWM, it's just had so much relative strength lately, and you can kind of see a little bit of a rotation going on in the sectors away from the bigger tech names and into some of the small caps and like growth stocks and things like that and high short interest names. So I just had a little bit more conviction that IWM would be stronger off the open than maybe like SPY or QQQ. And as you can see, if we switch over to SPY, it was, right? SPY kind of struggled. It eventually broke out, but it was a little rough early on as IWM was kind of just heading straight up for the most part. But on SPY, I took a nice short entry. And we'll talk about why I did that and how I did that. Let's look at the daily on SPY. I was focused on this pivot. You can see these alerts on my chart for SPY at least. I like to make these pivot areas, and these are areas where I'm interested in trading around. Sometimes that's on confirmation over to go long. Sometimes it's, do I see weakness there to short it? If it's on a pullback, do I see some support buyers stepping in to go long? They're just places I feel like big things can happen, but you got to be patient. You got to watch how price responds and volume and things around those levels to nail your entry. So coming into the day, I had my eyes here at 451.08 for a short. And here's why. It's the pivot. It's the high of day of this candle. It's a swing high, right, in this downtrend. And it's a place that we, since we rejected here and we headed all the way down to 420, we haven't retested it yet. So to me, that I'm looking for some type of action here. Ideally a short, to be honest, but if we had closed a higher time frame candle over this level, we could be, looking at calls for a continuation of this great move yesterday up towards this gap that's untested, this bear gap. But let's go back into the smaller time frames. And this is the thing I want to point out about this trade is this is the importance of kind of consistently flipping through different time frames on your charts. I spend most of my time flipping between the 5, 10, and 15. You guys know I like the 10 for confirmations on inside days and opening ranges and stuff. The 15 I'll use more for confirmation maybe on inside weeks or just levels that are really have been proven to be strong, weekly type levels. Things like this, or maybe swing entries. I want to see the 15 hold somewhere. But basically, I'm just kind of flipping through these all day. Every 15, 30 minutes, just refreshing, kind of looking, what does everything look like to make sure I'm not getting tricked or doing the wrong thing. And today you could have got a little tricked at this pivot, staring at shorter time frames. Now you look at the 5. I'm never going to use the 5 for confirmation over a pivot. That's just not what I do. But if you're staring at this for long enough, you start to look like, okay, well, we're overcoming this big level. We're holding it here. We hold it for 2 candles, 3 candles, 4 candles. But you'll notice on the 5, these wicks up, right? I call this a porcupine sometimes. You get a bunch of wicks up in a row. I say don't pet the porcupine. Why? Because you try to pet this porcupine, and by that I mean go long when you see candles like this, and this happens, right? More often than not. But also, let's look at the 10. On the 10, we closed a 10. We closed 2 10s. And, I'm not against going long at a place with a couple closes on the 10. But what I did notice, and like I said earlier, I kind of favored shorts here more than anything. Look at the respect in pre-market. Big wick up on the PPI data candle that closed back under this level. This level was going to be important. And so I flipped to the 15. I just wanted to see, well, what's this looking like? Here's the story. No 15 closes over, right? 3 wicks over and closes under. 4 if you count that pre-market candle. Then finally, kind of a strong red candle that pops on volume that closes back under. At this point, I wanted to go short, but we were just a little extended for me. About 46 cents, almost 50 cents. That's a little bit too much for me on SPY. I like to have about 50 cents of risk or so. And so, if I had entered here, by the time we even retested, I'd be thinking about stopping out. I'd be close to my risk on a stop out. So I just told myself, all right, if they dump it, they dump it. I'll miss the trade, right? It happens. It's going to happen to all of us. Happens all the time, every day. But I want to retest this level. Let's make sure that sellers are really in control here. We like that volume. And what do we get? We get that retest and we get it on low volume. This is where I'm in short. And the patience was rewarded, guys. Look at that next 15-minute candle. Flushes all the way through the opening range and ends up closing below it. Those puts went 100% so fast on the 0 DTEs. But that's why I'm so picky about the entries when I play those type of contracts. Because even that little wick up to retest, that would have had me taking a decent sized loss. But that's how I shorted SPY today. How I longed IWM. We didn't have great range in the market today, guys, and that's to be expected. After CPI, after that huge pump, 2% day on SPY and Qs and 5% day on IWM. We're kind of lucky that we got the moves up on IWM. We got early on, because as you can see, after that, the day was kind of choppy. You'd get a leg here, a leg there, reversal, some nasty wicks and things like that. Vixpiration. To the fullest here, and then we have OPEX on Friday. So there's probably going to be a need for more digestion in the market. You go back out to that daily time frame and kind of look at what we have here. We're going to need to build out a little bit more, maybe pull back, retest this gap, this fresh gap up, the bull gap. So try to be patient over the next few days. Market doesn't always, like this, doesn't just always go straight up and gap and gap and gap for too long without needing to take a breather and pull back a little bit. So that's what I'm kind of doing for the rest of the week. Not going to be forcing things too much. We made a lot of money on this move up, and we don't need to get too crazy going in to the end of this week as we let this move digest. Hopefully that helps, guys. If you have any questions, leave a comment or find me on Twitter and send me a message. I'll help you out.